Hello, everyone. Welcome to another awesome day of FileMaker Training. I'm Richard Carlton, creator of FMTraining.tv, where every day, I have to keep explaining this to people at Claris because not the guys here, but other people are like, you do a daily TV show? Yes, we do. Every day, 1 o'clock, we're here with you, learning about the FileMaker platform, learning how to make it better. A lot of you come on the show, the people who are out there watching this, you've come on the show, you've presented on topics. Then sometimes we present. It's always a learning moment for everyone because the FileMaker platform is great for return on investment. It's a great tool set to help to extend your organization or your customers' organizations. It's extremely powerful. So today we're going to be picking up the conversation on the FileMaker 23 launch. Before I do that, I want to bring up the upcoming broadcast schedule. So if you go to fmtraining.tv, right, fmtraining.tv, what you can do is see the left live training tab. This will bring up the information up here of the hot items. And this is FileMaker. We're using FileMaker to power the website. It's data API running out of FileMaker Server. Pretty cool. And so this is live records here, the next 6 training events that we have scheduled. Today we have a deep dive under FileMaker with FileMaker Server with Conner Brock and Doug Wallis. And then tomorrow is going to be some demos on FileMaker 23. So might have a couple demos today, depends on what the guys have planned. But tomorrow is more of like open demo, open Q&A. We're going to have some fun together. Friday, selling the Claris FileMaker platform to skeptical customers, right? I think it's actually a pretty easy conversation, largely because Apple helps a lot, right? So that's a good part of it. And then next week, it's not on the schedule here. I was having this conversation momentarily ago. Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday will be FileMaker Server 23 installs with Jacob Taylor. So Jacob's going to do kind of a walkthrough. He's going to do Mac, Windows, and Linux. I don't know which day is on which one, but the Windows is the high traffic one. The Linux is the next important one, and the Mac one are for people who, like me, who don't want to deal with Linux or Windows, right? So I use a Mac server and actually run my own test server even in my house, which is kind of neat. So, and the next week, Leland Long returns. We're doing JSON and JavaScript 1 day a week, every week. So we have like JavaScript Day. It's very exciting. Christian Schmidt from Monkey Bread Software will be here next week as well. Christian Schmidt is always showing us amazing things that we can do with a FileMaker platform that it doesn't do out of the box. It's how to extend it to make it better. It's super inexpensive plugin. I highly recommend it. And then way out, farther out, you can see this right here, May 11th. We have more Leland Long on JavaScript. So that's the upcoming broadcast schedule. I want to welcome everyone on Twitch, YouTube, and Discord. We had upwards of almost 300 people here yesterday. Probably a smaller group here today just because we're talking about the guts of server. And and not everyone cares about the guts of server unless it's blowing up and malfunctioning. And then they care a lot. But if it's well behaved and being quiet, then everyone is more happy with it. So it's it's kind of a funny product like that, right? No one wants to hear from it. If you hear from it, that's bad. So cool. And I want to welcome Conner Brock, who is from, well, what part of Claris do you work in, Conner?
I'm in the QA department.
QA department. So is that still part of engineering then? Is that under engineering?
It is, yeah.
Cool. All right. And then Doug Wallis, who is a product manager. Are you a product owner or a product manager? What are you, Doug? And why don't you fill us in on who you are?
So I'm officially a product manager, but stroke product owner. The product owner side is more on the way that we work internally on creating the apps and getting it to the market. My main function is actually, I work for Rick Kalman on everything on the current version of FileMaker. So Rick looks at everything FileMaker and Claris Server. I'm more focused basically on the FileMaker side of it and getting basically FileMaker to actually move forward with the times to be a modern sort of technology, a bit more than that. I've been at FileMaker for about 9 years now. Started in Europe, being the SE for Europe. Then before COVID, I joined the PM team. I've been there since 3 years now.
Okay, cool. Well, thank you for joining us. I think it's pretty late your time. Is it almost midnight your time? Something like that? Getting pretty late.
It's only 10 p.m., so it's normal day hour for me. So, yeah.
Only 10 p.m. All right.
Yeah.
All right, great. Well, thank you for making the time for us here. So if you folks, so here's how it's going to go. Connor and Doug are going to be, or Douglas are going to be having a conversation. We'll be throwing questions at them, and we'll also be helping the audience kind of figure out what questions you have, make sure they're on topic, and then we'll feed them questions as we go. This should, some of this will be fairly simple, but some of it's going to be pretty deep. So that'll be exciting. So if you guys want to go for it.
So we're going to talk about Claris FileMaker 2023, the server side. One of the things that I'll keep hashing around is the naming convention, so that we don't want to basically get too confused. The name of it is FileMaker 2023. The version code inside of FileMaker 2023 is actually, for the time being, 20.1. So I noticed basically, Richard, that on your slide you were talking about FileMaker 23. Potentially there'll be a FileMaker 23. We don't know now, but it might be different. So one of the things that we're doing, as Rick mentioned yesterday, is we want to go back into like this annual sort of release cycle in some of our products. And we're going to talk about FileMaker Server and around the work that we've been doing over the last, I would say, 6 to 9 months, where essentially what we're trying to do is make FileMaker Server as boring as it can be, so that once you got it installed, it just runs. I know that from some developers, they want like every sort of new stuff coming out. That's for the FileMaker Pro side of it, the FileMaker Pro side of it. We want FileMaker Server to be really boring, so that once you got it installed, the only place you pretty much need to go to is your log viewer and actually see anything around that, but everything else should be just pretty much stable. And what we've been working a lot is on the performance and the scale of the server. We want to basically make sure that it becomes a very boring software. So when it's running, it runs properly, offers you the performance that you need. And on top of that, we want to be able to offer you more scalability across the servers. So a lot of the work that we've been doing on the 19 sort of side of it, and 2023 as well on top of it, is to bring as many features as we can basically on the FileMaker Server on the admin console. And even though we know there's a lot of stuff that we want to do with the admin sort of part of it, we know that we can't bring everything inside the admin console, otherwise it's going to be too busy. So some of the functionality that you can use on FileMaker Server can be accessed through the data API, the admin API, sorry, or the CLI. And so we're giving you basically as much as we can to actually sort of have a really sort of boring server coming out of it. So a couple of stuff that we've worked on, they might seem not really that interesting in a lot of places, but there's a lot of work that we have to do to actually sort of get them to actually work to the level. So one of the things first that we did, which is kind of straightforward, is actually increasing the amount of files that you can have on the server to 256. Now, I know for a lot of customers and a lot of sort of developers, it doesn't mean that much, and you might not see the interest of it. But when we look at larger organizations or even SBA providers, where they have a lot of customers on one server because they're allowed to do shared hosting, it's very useful for them to actually be able to actually have more files on a single database server. And then one of the big aspects of the work that we did was to, in conjunction with updating the Java that we use for FileMaker WebDirect, so the previous version up to 19.6 was version 11, kind of outdated. We moved to 17. And on top of that, that allowed us to basically have more FileMaker WebDirect users on a system. Now, I know not everyone basically is going to have 1,000 WebDirect users on any machine, but the work that we've done essentially is to make everything more stable. And so if your underlying core system to host 50 users or 100, 1,000 is much more stable and has more full performance, then it's easier for you to actually sort of run it and feel secure about it. We'll talk briefly about the new version that we have for Ubuntu 2022, as we have now a version for ARM, a couple of stuff on the admin console, and there's a lot of stuff that we will go through. So to start off with, basically, I just wanted to go sort of quickly through this number of users on WebDirect. This is a screenshot of the QA work that our team is actually doing to be able to actually sort of get the system and build a system to actually get up to 1,000 users. So on this screenshot, you can see we've got 1,026. I think we've been able to actually go above that but pretty much you can have a stable system working around 1,000 users. Now, to be able to actually get 1,000 users, that's where sometimes it gets a bit more complex, is you need to actually have quite a few machines to be able to actually run that. So the way we've done it essentially is we haven't increased that much the amount of users you can have on every secondary machine. We just basically enable the system to have more secondary machines working together with a database server and with the Nginx load balancer that sits between the two so that everything actually works properly. So on a Ubuntu, whether it's ARM or the Intel version, you'll be able to actually roughly get between 110, 120 maximum users on top-end machine. But basically, the idea is to get about 100 connection per secondary machine. And so if you make up the math, you'll basically have 10 secondary machines with 100 users. That gives you 1,000. And with secondary machines, your prime machine is being turned off as a web publishing engine that it does basically its work properly. And then you can actually have your system. Now, we've got it working properly on Ubuntu. We're still doing some tests to see whether we could actually achieve vaguely the same numbers on Windows and the Mac version. Maybe not the Mac as much, but on the Windows, we're going to try to see where we can get to. And maybe we'll be able to actually get closer to the, I would say, 750, something like that, on the Windows environment, similarly then.
So that brings up a quick question. I'm just going to throw this out there real quick. Is that, are you seeing performance improvements using Linux? Because I think we did some testing initially, and then I went to court and some other folks had done testing on Linux, and there wasn't really a decisive performance improvement between that and Windows. So maybe it's the Nginx or Jacob, or I mean, how are they getting that much more performance on Linux? And we haven't seen that before.
So do you mean per machine or across the whole system?
Well, I mean, we did testing when Linux came out, and it was loosely within 10% of what Windows was doing. At least this is back with 19.5 or whenever we shipped this, 19.6, whenever we first started seeing Linux. And so the issue wasn't so much you got so much more performance, it was that you didn't have to pay Microsoft the licensing cost. So there's this savings, fundamental savings with Linux, which for me, I'm sold. As soon as you say I don't have to pay Microsoft to save the money, that's great. But if we're getting performance improvements now, that's news to me. That's awesome.
Yeah, so on the improvement, what we've done is we've actually done a lot of work on the CSS optimization of the cache to actually sort of get performance out of that. And we've done some work as well on the list views where, so there is a setting as well, which I think we're going to have a blog to actually sort of go through that, where we outline that basically you could actually have a control over the amount of record being viewed in the list view. So there's a lot of stuff that we've done in the system to actually sort of increase a lot of that work.
I can maybe add something to say here also that I really like Win's Net Punisher test suite that he uses for performance testing. So I use that myself and basically able to see the same results. And so it kind of, when we're talking about things being faster or slower, it really just depends on the operation you're talking about. And so we always try to focus on those areas where, you know, we're seeing things be, you know, slower than before, and all the different changes that we make to the product, you know, have the potential to affect things in one direction or the other. So it's just something we're trying to be vigilant about. But I think the main thing that we're trying to say here is more about the scalability rather than the performance. If that's right, Doug.
Yeah.
Okay.
And so the work that we've done to get those numbers and to get a better work out of that is we are working very closely with quite a few SBA partners where we know they have large solutions. So they need to be able to actually have a system whereby they can control the performance and basically how many users that they have. And so a lot of the work that we've actually been doing for, I would say, well, quite a long time, but especially on the latest sort of couple of 3-4 version, is to really work closely with partners and large users to really able to actually sort of test what we build in real world use cases. So the next one I'll go on, I'll quickly go through it, and then I'll get Conner to actually talk a bit more about it, into the sort of the weeds of it. So we've got this new feature. It is currently a preview. When we say preview, it's essentially a V1 of what we want to build now and what we want to actually take the product. So persistent cache with the quick server restart, kind of sort of new tools that we bring into the system so that we make it easier for you to be able to actually safeguard your data properly in case there's a crash, and to potentially in the future make it easier for you to actually update your FileMaker server without actually have even to sort of disconnect users. The long-term vision is kind of making the whole sort of environment of doing updates of FileMaker server a lot easier than before. So persistent cache essentially is really sort of basic. Currently you have one cache, and the client or whatever sort of type of client talks to the cache and then goes back to the data file. What we've done is the amount of space that you've allocated for your cache with the persistent cache turned on, we'll actually split that into two. One of which will be basically doing the normal sort of cache with the cache manager. And then the persistent cache will basically be on the side. And it will basically keep in memory all the temporary files basically that actually FileMaker builds over the time, so that in case there's a crash, it will use that information to rebuild basically your file properly in case there's a problem. So the idea behind this feature is essentially we want to minimize the time of data corruption and the data loss if FileMaker basically process crashes. Now we know that basically it's not going to fix 100% of the issues, but basically it's us getting a first sort of step and really sort of be able to actually sort of safeguard your data so that you don't actually sort of have too many errors. So it's kind of straightforward to enable. You can do it through the admin console, either through the CLI or the admin API, and it works kind of nicely. Anything else, Conner, you want to mention on that?
Well, but I imagine there's going to be some questions about this that we can try to answer. But I can just say that in our own testing of this, we have found that it can prevent data corruption and data loss, and that's really the whole point of it, is to be another layer of protection against those things. But it's I imagine it's something that once we're confident that it's always better to have it on rather than off, it may just become a normal part of using server is to use something like this. But yeah, I think there's maybe some expectations that it was going to be like the old startup restoration, but it's really not. It's its own thing. So we'll be happy to talk more about it.
Yeah. So there's going to be a tiny performance aspect because the system is going to write two different caches really at the same time. So it's not going to make your system quicker. It's not basically going to make extremely slow, but you might see a small sort of performance basically as it's writing. It's doing two actions at the same time to write the cache in memory.
Okay, so I'm going to interrupt real quick. I'm going to welcome Wim de Court. He is on Twitch. He has a question here, and he's a big contributor. And so I want to make sure if he asks a question that he kind of jumps to the front. He says, does this mean that when we use this feature, we should set a higher DB cache ?
Yeah, I think that I don't have a specific recommendation of what to aim for, but it is probably a good idea to raise that, since whatever is being cached with this setting off is really the same files being cached, but we're just splitting it out between the temporary files and the main files. So I guess I'd be interested to see some data on that being raised or kept the same. I'm afraid I don't have any data to share at the moment about that, but it's the same files being cached, just we're memory mapping the main files and treating the temporary files the same. So William, I appreciate you looking deep into this feature, and we definitely want to try to make sure we're all telling you honest on this stuff.
Yeah.
I have a quick question, just a thought. I mean, some of us, some of the engineers are more active in the community. I don't know who engineered this, but maybe getting it, you could talk to them or whatever. I don't know if Clay was involved with engineering this piece of it or who that was, but taking them to lunch or talking to them, Connor, finding out kind of how they did this, if they're using more memory or that the engineer should have a pretty good idea about that.
Well, it's like Doug said, it's the same, whatever your setting is currently, it's going to just use that, but it's going to split how it treats it. That whatever amount you allocate for the cache, it's going to just start treating the main files with a little differently than before. But in the end, it's the same temp files and the same main files, that require caching.
Go, Jacob.
I'm raising my hand. I guess I'm jumping to the line of all the people on Twitch who are asking questions, but I have the most basic question about this, which is in this optimal situation, you've got the feature turned on. We did, whatever, you're ready to go. FileMaker Server falls over for whatever that means, comes back up again. It tries to do the persistent cache restoration. What is that? What does that mean? How does that interact with the actual incorrectly closed database files?
It's the way I understand it is it's taking all of that, the transactions that need to be written into the file, and it stitches them back into the file at that point.
Okay. Margaret, Twitch questions?
Well, this is very much like then the startup restoration thing, right? If it's to kind of stitching and rebuilding and stuff. And so, I mean, it's an interesting kind of scenario because our standing recommendation with people is that, and I know Wim's here, and I'm sure they have a similar recommendation, is that if your server falls over, you restore from the backup period. It's not a negotiation, right? And so in this case, it becomes this squishy area in the middle where you could restore from, or not restore and use the files that are there.
Yeah.
But we're not guaranteeing that they're actually not cooked at all. We're just saying that they're probably less cooked, right? So I'm not being a jerk. I'm just saying, it's because we all know customers get FileMaker Server. They don't get any help. They don't have any support agreements. They don't do anything. They roll their own. When the power goes out, the power comes back, the server's running. It figures as long as FileMaker opens, they're good. And there's no kind of concept about emergency procedures, right?
Yeah.
And so for those people, this is helpful. It kicks the can down the road further, but we've had customers where the Louisiana and the battery backup's bad and the power is going up and down during a storm, and they crash the server twice a day, every day for a month until the databases are destroyed. So
yeah, I think the idea is that we would like this feature we would like the database state after using this feature to be trusted enough to continue to be used. And so that's what we're hoping for. And so maybe, not that we want to recommend not running backups or anything like that, but running backups, full backups at least, has a hit on the server. And so if you're running that very frequently, maybe with this, you can feel comfortable to run it less frequently and so get some performance gains just out of that.
Wim says, yes, we have to be conservative. We need to be able to rely on what this feature does and to verify that I'm going to add some words, verify that it's working correctly, I guess.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So absolutely. So I guess it comes down to, if you're just restoring from a backup, you're going to have data loss from that, from whenever the outage happened to when your last backup was. And so I guess the idea is that the data loss here would just be whatever was in memory still that didn't get cached, which should be very little. So that's what we're expecting out of this.
I'm going to ask 2 questions. I think these might have been grabbed. Is the performance issue on Linux limited to WebDirect?
Was there a specific performance issue that we mentioned? I'm sorry, you'd remind me?
Performance improvements. The question wasn't written well. We're talking about performance improvements like the CSS, etc., CSS lives also to a degree underneath the hood of FileMaker Pro layouts, right? That kind of idea. You guys' own kind of CSS for that. So are the CSS improvements limited to WebDirect, or are we going to see them other places as well?
I think the CSS stuff was limited to WebDirect. But we are trying to keep everything performant. So I don't want to leave the impression that we're only concerned about WebDirect performance, but that specifically, I think, is only going to impact WebDirect.
Okay.
So it's the way we basically sort of manage how a lot of the information goes through the Vadin sort of framework with the FileMaker layout, the CSS. So.
I know you guys got a bunch of free performance out of Nginx, switching to Nginx as well.
Because it being a lighter engine, and it works better with what we're trying to actually sort of do out of it. Hence why all the stuff that we're doing for large deployment is basically essentially going to Nginx Plus to actually use that as a load balancer. And we've got a really nice sort of engineering blog that actually tells you how to actually go through that. So quickly, the next one is OData. So we've done a update of OData so that it's compliant with the version 4.0.1. Essentially, what we are adding is, if I remember correctly, it's the related entities and the way they're actually sort of being managed. And there's a couple of other stuff that basically makes it compliant with the last version. I can't remember the whole list. I don't know, Conner, if you remember the whole list.
Sure.
It's kind of long.
Yeah, the related entities is referring to not making changes to the schema itself, but being able to pick a specific related record and say, now you're going to be related to different records, or now you're not going to be related to anything. And so these calls are just part of the OData 4.0 standard. So you're actually changing the data in like the foreign key field when you run these calls. And so I think this slide just has two different examples of how to run like a delete request. So you can do that either on a specific record or based off of a certain key to get multiple records out of that. And these examples would just null out that field.
Cool. So essentially, we wanted to get compliance with the latest version of OData. Next one is around Java garbage collection. So with the improvement using sort of Java 17 and the new JDK that we're going to basically using in the latest version of FileMaker Server 2023, we've created basically a way to be able to actually sort of collect or remove all the data in memory that Java uses to actually sort of create all the WebDirect pages in the background. So you could actually run it either on your primary machine if you just got basically one sort of FileMaker server with WebDirect running, or you can run it on the secondary sort of machines. And it's a nice way to be able, as I said, basically remove basically all that sort of leaks that basically Java keeps on having. We have an engineering blog that got released yesterday that goes through more into details of everything that it goes through. I think so there's 4 different collectors that we support. The default one is called the G1 collector, which is the default one, the simple one. It basically removes all the memory sort of leaks that can happen on the Java one. There's different one depending on the type of OSs that you want to use. So if you go to the engineering blog, there's a lot more information in that environment. And I think once we actually sort of have that in place and we have more feedback from users, I think we'll be able to actually sort of deep dive a bit more on our community website and even on engineering blogs to go into more details depending on basically use cases coming back from the field. There's a couple of sort of things to be sort of careful about is if you're upgrading from the previous version and you have the Java 11, it can create some issues. So essentially the idea is to remove Java 11 from the system, especially GRD1, so that you don't actually sort of run into issues with the 2 Java environments sort of collide.
And just to add to that, it's very similar to the issues that folks had when we moved from Java 8 to Java 11. But one thing we did try to do this time to make that transition a little easier is if your Java home is set to the Java folder inside FileMaker Server and you perform the upgrade, server can detect that and remove that, internally use Java, so that at least you're not, it just saves you that extra step to have to do that manually. The scenario in which it's still problematic is if you have Java home set to like an OS level installation of Java. We don't want to remove that for automatically. So
yeah,
that's the main.
So we got a couple comments and questions here, so I'm going to kick it over. Christian Schmidt at Monkey Bread says, hey, why Java 17 and not Java 19? Java 19, I tried it, seems to work great. What's up with that? And then code, and then there's other questions too. Go ahead.
Oh, sure. Yeah, I think that's mostly just a timing issue on the development cycle that, we I think started with Java 17 when we were conceiving this idea. So I'm sure we'll always move up to a higher and higher version, but just where it's at this time.
Cool. And then Rosemary TG is posting some blogs. Margaret, I want to make sure you're cross-posting those if you see those on Twitch. So we're being monitored by headquarters. Whenever Rosemary's here, I get nervous because she's going to critique me after the fact. This would be my little grade score after that. Code to Go says on Twitch, we still need to download JDK separately. Yes.
Yeah, on Windows and Mac. Yeah.
Okay.
This is purely a licensing on app that we can't do it. You have to go through Atomium to actually download it.
Hey Jacob, is this the Corretto conversation kind of
Yes,
right here? Is that?
Yep.
Okay. So there's a Corretto 17 or 19 or?
Yes, there is. Yep.
Okay.
That's
so
it.
there's
Yeah, we ship Amazon Corretto on our servers, which, as he noted, is one of the externally and system level Javas basically. We like it because it doesn't do what the Oracle one used to do, which was auto update itself. And so this one sits nicely on the server, and yeah, it will cause problems if you're on the wrong version or whatever. For our clients, we handle all of that, so it doesn't really matter. But
cool. Next one is the Active Directory support for Ubuntu on both 20 and 22. So something that's been there on the Windows side and Mac for a long time, we have now fully working on Ubuntu. Again, I think it's a preview. It essentially is because we've been able to actually implement the functionality. We've done some testing around it, but depending on how your system is actually set up, maybe there might be some issues around it. So feel free to actually reach us out if it doesn't work for you. I do believe we're going to have a blog entry on that. I don't know if it's coming out soon or not. I can't remember, there's so many blogs that we're doing in the next couple of, currently we have 4 out yesterday, there's a few more out there, so I don't know exactly when it's come out. Kind of useful to actually be able to use that in all your system.
There was a question from someone earlier, and I don't remember who it was, but they were saying, oh, we can't wait for Conner to show this to us working in a live demo today.
Oh.
And I went,
I'm afraid I don't have one handy for this one, but I know it's just a matter of putting some settings in admin console from the FileMaker server perspective. All the setup really is on the Active Directory side here. But I guess I can just give some context that when we first made the move to Linux, this having native support for external groups was like one of the things we couldn't do at the time. And so that was where we brought the ADFS support in, is to sort of be a placeholder. But the problem there is that you've got the extra click for the OAuth button. The idea behind this is that you don't have to click that button anymore, just to get external groups to work. But if anyone's having trouble getting it to work, we can troubleshoot with them on that.
Okay, I do have a question here. I got a first time chat from
I'm pretty sure that's Geist, right?
Is that okay? So it's supposed to be Proof Geist, but someone's call sign. I always like these stage names for people, right? It's Proof Jesus. So Proof Jesus is asking the question, what is the recommended frequency to schedule for Java garbage collection? Is it solution-based? Is there a maximum recommended frequency?
We don't have anything hard and fast in that regard. And it's really like, I think we all know what a memory leak looks like at this point. When you see a specific process, climbing several gigs in size. So if you notice Java doing that, then that's a good time to do the the garbage collection. And so I've spoken with folks who do have that happening, at a faster rate than others. I think it seems to be pretty common that I'll talk with people who have been doing like a daily reboot of FileMaker Server just to keep issues like that from happening. So this could be looked at as like an alternative to doing the daily reboot.
So daily, not necessarily hourly, or so. I guess.
Yeah, I'm just trying to speak as generally as possible, but that's kind of what I would expect. Yeah.
And we've got two system scripts that could be run whenever you want to. So depending on your needs, like Conner is saying, is it's on your, depending on your solution and your needs, you can decide when you want to actually run them. So
yeah.
We have one client they're doing daily or sometimes every 2 days reboots right now for that on 19.6. And I was going to put them on probably every hour, which is likely too often, but we'll fix the problem.
Yeah.
So we'll see. I mean, I
don't think we've encountered any. I don't think we've encountered any real serious downside to running it. So it's something to play with. But yeah,
I
however
won't be
often you're
adjusting
doing
their garbage collection engine either. So it's I know G1GC is fast, so that'll minor application latency.
Quick question from Hansa from 24U. Is there or going to be a way to trigger garbage collection in FMW IPD and FMSASED? I guess those are processes. He says this would be very helpful.
That's a great idea. I'll have to check and see if that's something that we've already had suggested, but if not, I'll make sure that we look into that.
All right.
Cool. I think I saw some stuff on the first one being in the works, so we'll see. Other thing that we had is the option to be able to cancel backups. So obviously, as before, it was a bit of a pain. Now, basically, when you start a backup, you could actually cancel one, and there's an option for you to be able to actually keep your cancel backups in the system, just to actually save you a bit of heartache when you're running a backup and you want to cancel it because it's going to take ages. That's kind of what we're trying to actually do there without the whole system sort of crashing like it used to do a couple of versions back.
Yeah, and I think the context here is that the canceled in the previous version, the canceled backups were being preserved automatically, and so that was actually taking up disk space that was not useful, and so we're now not preserving them by default, but you can turn it back on if you like, and then it now appends a prefix to show you which ones are the canceled ones.
No question on that one. So I had a quick sort of slide of all the overview of stuff that we've actually sort of brought into this version. The other thing that we brought on top of it is in terms of the logs. Now you'll have two new logs, one for script events and one for the FileMaker script engine script errors that you can find in log viewer. So a lot of information out of that, kind of useful. So the support for Ubuntu 22. So now we basically are supporting two versions of Ubuntu 20 and 22. And we are doing a Intel and ARM version for the Ubuntu 22. I know everyone's going to ask, we can't get it from the ESD. We know that because of all the work that we do, we have to do some changes on the ESD page where you download your app, your installers. So we're hoping that very soon you'll be able to actually get the Ubuntu 22 version for ARM from that area. A lot of the tests that we do now, and especially some of the stuff we've done on the WebDirect sort of 1,000 user connection, is using the ARM infrastructure because it has a bit more sort of power than for that area. It means that it's easier now to actually sort of use a lot more of those big data or hosting company or data centers that provide, in other cases, cheaper hosting using ARM chips versus the others. On top of that, you could run it really easily now on a Mac Mini through virtualization. So whether you want to use Parallel Desktop or UTM or anything that's out there, it's kind of straightforward to be able to actually do that. And on top of that, for the Claris server side of it, it means that because we currently only support Linux, it makes it easier for people, if they want to be able to actually, on the next version, when Claris server comes out, well, they'll be able to actually sort of do virtualization on the Mac Mini if you need that. So it's kind of good for us to actually sort of go that way. On the DAPI, there's a couple of small changes. One that we have is now you can actually use Save as PDF through DAPI. That's kind of cool. We've fixed some bugs around the number of characters you can have on the schedules. We've got a Docker script for Ubuntu 22 and 20 in the FileMaker Server Tools folder. Yeah. So we've got to clean up the cancel backups. And for FileMaker Admin Console as well, we have a better option now to be able to import admin group from FileMaker 16 into the system. So the idea is for all the customers that haven't moved for a long time for all different versions of FileMaker, if they're using still FileMaker 16, they'll be able to actually pretty much move all their settings across to a FileMaker 2023 server, and they'll have pretty much, I think, everything on par between the two. There's a lot of various sort of other stuff that we've updated. A couple of stuff like on security, we've updated everything to OpenSSL 3.0.8. I believe that's the version that we have across the board. On 19.6, because we had still Ubuntu 18, which was still on OpenSSL 1, and we had a bit of a transfer. So now everything has got the latest support for OpenSSL 3.0.8. And before I forget, the technical specs. So we are supporting the latest two version of macOS, being 13 and 12, so Ventura and Monterey. For Windows, it's 2022 Data Center and Standard Edition, and 2019 the same. For Ubuntu, as you can see, we've got 4 different flavors now. You could use both the server version or the desktop version. Really depends, basically, what you feel more at ease with. I think that the install of FileMaker Server through the command line is actually kind of straightforward. What I normally tell when people are actually scared of using Ubuntu and they are on Windows, I kind of go, well, if you're not scared of using Windows Server, you should not be scared of using Linux, because it's not that hard. And then for the supported client, we go back to 19.4.2. So if you have a FileMaker Server running on any other version prior to 19.4.2, they will not work with FileMaker 2023. So if you can't upgrade everything, I would suggest at least try to upgrade most of your system to latest version 19.6. And that way you don't have to, you'll have no issues working with the two systems together.
Before we go into that, just hold here for a second. So I'm going to do a little cleanup, and then Rosemary and Wim and Hansa and everyone else, you have questions about this before we pivot to the DevCon thing.
Yeah.
Per Rick Kalman yesterday, Hansa asked this question. Hansa, you missed our show yesterday. Bad boy. The ARM Ubuntu installer was excluded. It's on a short delay. Rick thought it'd be a couple days. I don't know if there's any additional, Connor, on that. That installer being made available? I
mean, nothing that Doug didn't just. I think it is mostly just getting the ESD page configured correctly, but you know, we're ready to hand it to you as soon as we're allowed to.
Okay, so it's pretty close on that. There was a question from Max R. We kind of covered this, but I'm going to we had a customer, they got the shiny email from Claris that said, hey, FileMaker 23 is here, and they pressed upgrade right away. Yeah. And some of their users were on 19, they were upgrading the server, and some of their users are on 19.1, 19.2 clients. I'm going to reemphasize this again because people are getting hit with this. The minimum client to talk to a FileMaker 23 server is 19.4, and vice versa. So if you have a 19.4 server, okay, your Pro 23 can connect to it. If you're on a 19.3 server, Pro 23 won't connect to it. So 19.4 is your operating range, right? Is kind of the idea with that. Code to Go says, so potentially the RAM requirements for WebDirect, especially, are going to be, I think he's speculating here. So potentially the RAM requirements for WebDirect, especially, are going to be reduced because of the garbage collection ? I'm guessing that's one of the reasons for improved WebDirect performance.
Well, yeah, I mean, I think that where we set the recommended specs was an aggregate across everything we're seeing. So yeah, this certainly does help, and was a factor in that decision. Yeah.
Yeah, if you look at our tech specs, basically we created a small table to kind of go through what we consider a minimum requirement, a good and the best version of a web publishing sort of machine, depending whether you are on Mac, Windows, or using Ubuntu and stuff like that. So we're trying to give as much information basically for people to actually sort of buy the correct hardware. Obviously, like I was saying, is we're trying to make this FileMaker server really boring, so that once it's actually basically up and running, it does everything on its own basically without sort of creating any issues.
Boring is
I like boring. Boring's my favorite. As the server guy, boring is my favorite.
Question.
Oh, okay. There's a question from yesterday. So Hansa loaded a question at Rick Kalman yesterday, and Rick Kalman said, well, that's such an easy question to answer. I'm just going to hand it to Douglas and Connor to answer today. So here is the question. So here's the scenario. We're talking about the I think it was PSOS actually. I think the question was about PSOS, but it was what, Cons, you want to help me with this? So yesterday Rick suggested when you call PSOS with the callback, and if you initiate that with WebDirect, and then before it does the callback, the WebDirect client disconnects, what happens? And does, I can't remember, it wasn't PSOS about Windows transactions, really? Okay, so it's about the transaction. So Hansa, one more time, help me out here. Help me out.
So basically on the with the transaction, he wants if you lose the connection, what happens with the script trigger basically that's going to happen, and whether the data is going to be lost or if the data is going to be written. So on with the transaction works similar to basically on record commit. So if you lose the connection, the data will still be stored basically in the WebDirect session. So it won't actually write. For me, I think it won't actually write anything. I don't know if we tested that. We probably have to actually sort of test that to actually see what exactly happens. But
yeah, I'd feel comfortable to double check before I said for sure.
So I'm just trying to understand this. So he's talking about you start a transaction on WebDirect or not in WebDirect, and then before you execute the transaction, because it's running, because it's really running on the server, it's not running on the client. So then if you disconnect, if the server registers that you've disconnected and it hasn't got to the end of the transaction, it should, in giant quotes, abort, right? But that's a big should, right? Yeah. Okay.
Should be easy enough for us to confirm. Off the top of my head, I don't know if I can say for sure. Just don't remember.
That's a good question.
It is.
Should. I like the should. So I do air quotes with should. That's where we're at. Okay, we have another Proofgeist person who refuses to say Proofgeist. They are Proof Moof. They said that boring servers are good, which is awesome. So, and then someone wants me to pull out the puppet, but the puppet's off duty today. These guys are killing it. They're answering all the hard questions. And you know what I like about it is when they don't know, they say they don't know. If this was like a corporate executive event, they'd be like, well, in a strategic analysis of the transactional, the answer is no. and everyone knows what happened, right? But they say I don't know. I love that because then we know to bring it up later. There is, Maxar has a question. Is there a CLI only install for Ubuntu server versions, question mark?
Sorry, only for? Can you repeat
Is
that
there
again?
a command line interface only install for Ubuntu server versions?
Oh, yes. So the on screen we've got the under the Ubuntu section, a desktop and a server. When I think the server version refers to the minimal install command line only. Is that the question, or am I misunderstanding?
Yeah, I mean, at one point you had to go and find wasn't there a web interface? That was initial when they first came out. Jacob, you want to help me here? Go,
That
Jacob.
was Claris Server. That was not FileMaker Server.
Okay.
FileMaker Server has always been command line only on Linux. That is the primary and supported pathway for that short version. So.
Okay, so that was a Claris server.
It's what scares people away from the FileMaker Server on Linux because they've got to pop open terminal and run. Actually, you guys have got it down to one command, but one command.
The confusion that we had before was for Claris Server, the install link that we were providing was the UTM link. So basically a tracking link that goes back into our system so that we can track basically marketing follow-ups, that we know who's downloading and stuff like that. What we did for Claris Server, if you have Claris Server, you'll see that you have a direct link to be able to actually sort of download directly from your Linux environment the installer. So it's like a wget, and then you've got the URL of the latest version. From the ESD, you basically just right-click on the link. You'll see the URL. You can copy paste that, and you can do a wget from your Linux environment. You can directly download from there.
Lynn from Austin has a question. I thought I read that the FileMaker 2023 now allows transfer settings to transfer server settings when installing a new version. Is this correct? And if not, is that something being considered?
Well, what's new this time is if you do an uninstall and then a reinstall on the same machine, it can detect and reuse the existing settings. And then, of course, for a few versions now, we've had the upgrade install where you're just doing an install on top of an existing version without the uninstall. It'll just pick up and reuse those settings.
Just quickly for all the customers on FileMaker 16, you can basically download your settings from your FileMaker server 16 server, and then you can pull them back into your FileMaker Server 2023.
So as we land as the airplane, this is your captain speaking, as we're going to land this live stream, we're on a final approach. We want to talk about DevCon. Sorry, it's a developer conference, but you don't call it that. So it's called the Secret Conference in Austin. And I've offered someone, and one of my people, to do this. I was told that the building is still being built, in which case that makes me slightly nervous. So I was going to pay someone in Austin to go get pictures if the building is done. So you want to go? Here it is, February 6th, 7th, and 8th, Austin, Texas. Very exciting. Do we know if the building is built or going to be built? Or?
So I believe it's built because it's where the Apple ACs have done some training. So,
okay, cool.
But I will double check with Rosemary and the marketing team to make sure that. And like I always says, if we can't actually find everyone actually a place to stay, we could always go to Clay's place. He lives nearby, so I'm sure Clay will be happy to have 1,000 developers coming to his place.
All right. Any last questions? I want to thank Conner Brock and Douglas Wallis. I want to thank them for coming on the show. It's very exciting. And if you have other questions, if we can get Wim de Court, some of the other folks together, maybe Todd Geis, if we want to get together and we're gonna interrogate you two and get more information out of you on future versions of Server. You have been very cooperative. We really appreciate the brutal honesty, which is great. We really like that. Jacob, yes, we like the honesty.
Yep. Well, thank you. It's good to be here.
Okay, so Rosemary swears that the conference center is built and is open. The rest of the campus is still under construction. Okay, so there is things that are under construction. I'm not making this up. I was just worried that Claris had committed to an event where they're like, it's dirt, we're building it. And we get to like January, like, where are we going to be? Cool. Codigo says it's Texas. They're gonna either have it ready or a fleet of trailers will be shipped in at the last minute. Rosemary says much more information coming soon on Claris Engage / DevCon, hotels sponsoring exhibits, speaking, etc. Yeah, I look forward to Wim de Court giving a giant presentation. I'm going to sit there and watch it. It will be awesome. All right, Connor and Douglas, you guys are great. Thank you very much for coming on. This is being recorded. We will clean up all the shenanigans out of here, and then it will be posted to YouTube. All right. Anything, final comments? All right, cool. Have a good day, folks. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.
Got a report of an individual up here who may be a FileMaker license. Well, it's potentially expired. Look at the back of that car right there. Looks like the FileMaker license has expired. Sir, I need you to step out of the vehicle. Sir, step out of the vehicle. Sir.